Aiden, over the last couple of weeks, everything we thought we knew about this AFL season has been flipped on its head and then turned inside out and then flipped on its head again. I'm not sure what to believe anymore because I'm meant to believe that the second and third best percentage teams in the AFL sit in 11th and 12th place on the ladder. I'm meant to believe that Gold Coast just scored 164 points in Darwin against Chris Scott's Geelong. I'm meant to believe that Jake Waterman, who spent 2023 on the fringe of West Coast forward line, who couldn't score a goal last year, he's now the best forward in the AFL. I'm meant to believe that Blake Hardwick, a 5'7" half backman, is a 5-goal-a-game machine, unstoppable out of the square. I'm meant to believe that Adelaide refused to chuck a man behind the ball when you have a lead late in the game. Matthew Nicks, you can only blame the umpires so many times. Chuck a man behind the footy. I'm meant to believe that an 18-year-old made Christian Petrarca and Clayton Oliver, two champions of our game, look average. And I'm meant to believe that Port just scored 2 goals in the final 30 seconds to beat Hawthorn by 1 point. And I'm meant to believe that after 10 rounds, Essendon sits in second place. I've come to the conclusion that I'm being Truman Showed. None of it is real. The one thing that I know is that the mighty Swans are flag hunting. Your thoughts on round 10?
I absolutely love that. But on top of that, I have the craziest stat. This is my stat of the week. I'm looking at goalless quarters in 2024. There is one team that has 0 goalless quarters in 2024. You know what it is?
No.
North Melbourne. North Melbourne are the only team this season with got no goalless quarters.
That is one of my favourite stats I've ever heard.
Yeah, so on top of all of that, North Melbourne, only team with 0.
Now I just wish I put that in there. But we're going to jump straight into our top 5 players of the round before a cool segment where we're going to talk about how the Swans are dominating everyone. They're just a class ahead of everyone, and we're going to talk about, as Swans fans, who we think are the 10 most important players on the Swans. But first, top 5 players of the round. Do you want to kick us off with your number 5?
Zach Butters. Now, his game was entirely saved by that fourth quarter, but I think that's the best single quarter performance I've potentially ever seen.
Yeah, it was unreal.
Was it 17 touches, 5 clearances?
7 contested possessions.
Yeah, I can't believe what I was seeing.
To force a 40-point turnaround for his team.
It was absolutely unbelievable. And he was having a very, very quiet game for his standards. He just said, you know what? I'm going to bring this home for my team. And it's not like all of his touches went to players, but he was driving that ball forward. 17 touches in a quarter. Your team's down by 40 points. And you're the main guy that turns around after you've had a pretty quiet game. I mean, deserves to be in the top 5.
He was awesome. I actually don't have him in there.
Wow.
After all the stuff I talked to you, he saved my Supercoach season again.
Again?
For the 4th time. And I just thought there were about 8 performances that had to be in there this week. He's one of the ones that just didn't make it.
I just think I had to give it, commend him on that fourth quarter.
At 5, I've got someone that I know you'll have higher, and that's Noah Anderson. Where do you have him?
I have him at number 3.
Okay. Well, he was in a dominant Gold Coast performance. He was the standout. 2 goals and 42.
I mean, come on. Against Geelong, Christ. It wasn't like it was a hapless opposition.
Gold Coast are so confusing. I don't know if we're going to talk about it that much later, so let's talk about it now. Gold Coast are such a confusing team. I said to Aiden, there's so many crazy stats and crazy facts at the moment. I've seen probably the best and the worst performance of this season from any team out of Gold Coast this week, and then 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago against Brisbane. The performance we saw against Brisbane was hopeless. We were watching that game.
Laughing.
They were putting in no effort. They couldn't kick to a teammate 20 metres away. It was just the worst performance I've seen from a team this season. And they come out and beat Geelong, probably the most consistent team in the AFL over the last 20 years.
They drop 164 points on their head.
There are many, many teams in the AFL that are very confusing this season. Gold Coast is probably the most confusing. But Noah Anderson was a standout, and so that's why I've got him at 5. Who do you have at 4?
Number 4, I had Jake Waterman.
I have him at 4 as well.
Okay,
we agree on something.
He kicked 5 goals. He's one of the best, if not the best forward in the league. On form, he's the best forward in the league right now. He's tying the Coleman with a game less. But still, his top 5 players of the round. He kicked 5 goals. He dominated a very strong Melbourne defence, and he looked like he's having fun out there.
His last 5 games, he's kicked 4+ goals in all of them, and in 4 of those games, he's kicked 5+. So he's just been ridiculous. He's tied in the lead for the Coleman medal, playing on a team which has not been consistently good, and has missed a game. Yeah. So he's been unbelievable, and I don't think there's any doubt that he's been the best forward in the league so far this year.
Oh, 100%, and I mean, he's going to be one of those guys that we look at the end of the season as one of the most, if not the most improved player that we've seen.
Completely. And so you've already had your number 3 in Noah Anderson.
Yeah.
My number 3 was Harley Reid.
I like that. I had him at number 1, actually. I had him at number 1. You know what?
Okay,
you know
you
what?
talk about it then.
He just created one of the best highlight reels we've ever seen in a single game. We have the fend off Petrarca and Clayton Oliver.
Fending off Petrarca and Oliver.
Whoa.
2 don't argue.
He's kicked goal of the year. He's taken the ball out of the middle. He's ran past Petrarca, Oliver, Max Gorn, and Viney, who was just watching. Then kicked it from 50 and nailed it. He's been involved in several other plays. In the interview after the game, with Melbourne, his name slipped my mind. Who's the Melbourne coach?
Simon Goodwin.
Simon Goodwin. He said we could not go with Harley Reid. I don't know if you saw that, but he was unbelievably dominant and scary, like very, very scary.
It was his 16th birthday as well. And so I think he was just celebrating. He was high on energy. Thought, sweet 16, he'll just go crazy.
But yeah, he did, there were performances that stat-wise were better than him in the week, but to do that...
We don't care about stats.
No, but against that Melbourne midfield, that Melbourne team, to dominate like he did and really drive his team to victory,
yep.
I think deserved best player of the round for me.
Unreal. Well, okay, since you have 1 to go, I've got 2 to go. I'll go.
Okay.
And number 2, I've got Dan Houston.
Okay, I didn't have him in my top 5.
I just want to get the stat line up. He kicked 3 insane goals from pretty much all outside the 50. He got 22 disposals, 10 tackles, and 8 marks. And that's just the stat line. But he was so phenomenal defensively as well. 2 contested marks, and then a mark inside 50 as well. I've never seen such a well-rounded performance from a guy playing on the half-back line. Most of the time in that role, you're limited in what you can do for your team. But he was just everywhere. He was everything offensively and defensively. And while Port was struggling, he was keeping them in the game. But then it was Zach Butters late, as you said.
100%. I just want to preface, as we're wrapping up this top 5 of the round, I'm no longer picking players that have played against Richmond. So now, if you play against North and Richmond, because I know Zorko had an insane stat line as well, Lockie Neal played very well, but I'm no longer picking players until those teams improve.
I think our final player is the same. It's my number 1 and your number 2 is Chad Warner.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Do you want us to tell? Yeah, you tell us.
I think Chad Warner is freakish. The fact that we have Isaac Heaney and Chad Warner in the same midfield is a blessing as Swans fans, because you have Isaac Warner, who's such a well-rounded midfielder that can win the ball. He's gone and I'm going to talk a bit more about it later, but he goes and kicks goals. And then you have Chad Warner, who kicks just as many goals, but he just...
You said Isaac Warner before.
Did I?
Yeah.
Anyway, Chad Warner, he's just so explosive. And the way that his first step, the acceleration, I've never actually seen it. I've never seen that level of explosion on the first step. And the way that he can just break tackles, like with no momentum, he's just got someone on him and he can just wrestle them off him. The strength and the agility, it's unbelievable. And it was on full display.
I'm assuming we're both going to talk about it more later when we look at our top 10 most influential players. So we won't dive too much into it now. But we'll move on to our next segment, which is the top 10 most influential players of the Swans so far this year.
Starting at number 10, I've got Tom Papley. I'm going to try race through this, but I've got some notes. He's been called the Swans barometer, high energy, an all-Australian small forward. Every time he's around the ball, he's damaging. I cannot believe that he's at number 10. But the only reason would be pretty much everyone has been up this year. His goal kicking's been down. He's still that same player, but his goal kicking's been down this year. At number 9, I've got James Jordan. Has done an incredible job locking down the opposition's best. Longmire knows what he's doing, and it baffles me that every coach doesn't implement a tagger. We've seen some of the names on his hit list have been Whitfield, Clark, Walsh. At number 8, I've got Chad Warner. Another guy that it's just ridiculous that I have him this low, but if we were talking about the best players at the Swans, he'd be up in 3-4. In terms of how important he is, I think our midfield is so strong and well-rounded at the moment that there are other places where there are players that we rely on more, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There have been certain games where Chad Warner hasn't been at his best, and our midfield is still
This is your opinion.
So at number 8, I've got him. But as we talked about earlier, freakish athleticism. And I think over the last couple of years, his 2 weak points have been his defensive work rate and his decision-making. He's massively improved on the decision-making front. And if he can keep working on that defensive work rate, being a balanced midfielder, he could be one of the best. At number 7, I have James Rowbottom, who's my guy, the name on the back of my jersey. I'd say there are 15 teams, probably, that are dying to have a defensive-minded midfielder with the traits of James Rowbottom. He's the best tackler in the competition, has the most prolific tackler in the competition this year, and he perfectly complements the rest of our midfield.
I can think of 3 others in the league that are like it.
Raul?
Dunkley, I'd say,
Steele?
and Liberatore.
Yeah. I just think he perfectly complements the rest of our midfield. You have the creative flair and hard running of Goulden, as we talk about the freakish explosiveness of Warner and the ball winning and goal kicking ability of Heaney. Rowie brings that grunt and he leads the way with the tackling. He's keeping a 3-time best and fairest winner and club legend Luke Parker out of this midfield, and he's the man on the back of the jersey for a reason.
Do we want to talk about Luke Parker for a second? Because he might be missing a few weeks. Did you see that? The bump?
Yeah. What about it?
I've heard it could be 3 or 4 weeks. He could be missing.
I really hope not, but it's sad. At number 6, I've got Errol Goulden. Best winger in the competition, I reckon. Best left foot in the comp. The vision. I reckon he's a future Swans captain. He's got these Sydney boy, academy lad.
Turned down a massive offer to stay here as well.
Yep, Taylor Swift fan. He's got the loyalty and dedication. And along with his skill...
Loyalty and dedication.
He is.
Just after Taylor Swift comment.
Yep. Along with his skill, he is such a hard runner, which I think some of the mainstream AFL media don't recognise. And he just if he's not outclassing his opponent, he's outworking them. At number 5, I've got Tom McCartan. The general down back, as reliable as it gets, and he's so important for us.
I like that, the general.
The general. The Virgil van Dijk.
Okay.
When Trent and Robbo are charging forward, we trust him to hold down the defence.
Okay.
At number 4, I've got Brodie Grundy.
I like it.
The difference that he has made to our midfield has been noticeable and so refreshing to have such a dominant ruckman. While he's strong in the ruck contest, it's the fact that around the ground, it's like having another midfielder. The clean hands and the ability to move through bodies and make decisions is elite for a ruckman. And there's a reason why he's a dual All-Australian and at points was considered alongside Dusty and Danger as maybe the best player in the league in 2020 to 2018. At number 3, I have Nick Blakey. The reason that I say he's that important, we know his quickness, creativity, kicking ability to break through opposition lines single-handedly. But on the defensive side, hugely underrated, and I think holds our defense together with his combination of height and agility. It allows him to defend both smalls and bigs. We've seen him lock down Charlie Curnow at points over the last couple of years, and we've seen him lock down Toby Green. The fact that he can defend all types of players while also being one of our biggest offensive threats makes him so important for us. Just to have, especially since we are a bit undersized down back, to have a guy that's 6'4" but has the agility to play against small defenders, small forwards as well, is crucial for us. And
is he 6'4"?
He's 6'4".
Oh, I thought he was smaller than that.
Yeah, and similarly, I have Dane Rampy at 2. I reckon Dane Rampy is our second most important player.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about Dane Rampy before.
No,
that's why I thought he was smaller. Yeah,
no, but he's also a guy. I don't think Nick Blakey's defended Toby Green, but I reckon he could. Dane Rampy is, I reckon, the best lockdown mid-sized defender in the competition, alongside maybe a Tom Stewart.
I'll mix them up.
You'll mix what? Oh, you mix them up?
I thought you were talking about something.
But I think Dane Rampy is the most underrated player on the Swans at this point. The composure, experience, and his hunger at all times. Within the last 3 weeks, as we mentioned, we've seen him lock down Toby Green and Charlie Curnow. The impact that it makes when he's down back, he was out for a couple of weeks, it's just so massive. He's just so reliable and provides our defense with so much adaptability. And I think when you look at what's important to our team, Dane Rampy is the second most important player. The most important player, I think, is Isaac Heaney. He's the best player in the league. I'm going to rattle off where he ranks in the league for some stats. Number 1 for score involvements. Number 7 for contested possessions. Number 8 for clearances. Number 10 for inside 50s. And with all of those dominant midfield stats, he is top 25 in the league for goals scored. There are, I think, 6 teams in the competition that don't have a forward that have kicked as many goals as Isaac Heaney as a full-time midfielder. He has been the biggest factor in the Swans midfield transformation, which has seen us go from a mediocre midfield last year to the easily dominant midfield in the competition this year. And that's my top 10.
I like it. I have a few changes. I have one person in my list that's not in your list. Okay. I didn't have Papley in my top 10.
Wow.
My favourite player,
How difficult was that?
Papley. That was really tough. And you'll find out in a second who replaced him in that list. But yeah, we have a few people that are in different positions. I'll roll through mine a little bit quicker, just because we've heard your thoughts already. So James Jordan at number 10, the Padlock.
I can't believe I didn't use the nickname.
Is what they call him at the Swans, the second best tagger in the league. But not only is he a tagger, he's a damn good player as well.
And who's the best tagger in the league?
My boy, the Ice Block, Finn McGuinness.
But yeah, as you say, he's a good player in his own right, and that's what separates him maybe from a Finn McGuinness.
Yeah, Finn McGuinness is not a good AFL player. He's a good tagger. No.
Fair. I reckon he's better than you give him credit for.
He's a good tagger and he's a great runner.
Yeah.
But I think if you compare him to James Jordan, a guy that can kick goals from outside 50, he's a great winger in his own right and can do a great job tagging in the forward line or in the middle. He's just got it all. I love him. In my number 9 was Ollie Florent, someone you didn't have, but he stepped up his level this year. His pace and kicking, his prowess off halfback, huge reason why we're able to transition the ball the way we are. He's averaging 23, 24 disposals this year. Him, Blakey, Lloyd, the guys off halfback have been hugely influential. My number 8 was Rowbottom. This was tough because I don't think a lot of this happens without him. Every team needs a Rowbottom, which is similar to what you said. And I'm going to say it now. I think he's the most underrated player in the competition.
I love it.
Because
that's my boy.
The rest of our midfield is overshadows him. So when you look at the Swans midfield, you see Goulden, Heaney, Warner. You don't really think about Rowbottom. And I'm thinking now he's just up there with one of the best midfielders in the league. And not a lot of talk. I'm going to say that now.
Wait, second most underrated, right? After Miles Bergman.
I think you can only underrate someone for so long before he's actually rated. My number 7 was Errol Goulden. He's the best kick in the comp, no question.
Our rankings are very similar.
Hugely important cog in ball transition. Always looks for the corridor, which I love, which is a huge part of the Swans game. And he's a forward's dream. My number 6 was Nick Blakey. So I think he's the most important piece ball movement from the back 50 to the forward 50. The ability to play on a key back and small forward. Great kick and not afraid to take a man on and drive into the open space. My number 5 was Chad Warner, a mix of Chris Judd and Ben Cousins. Tackles hard, kicks goals.
Mix of Chris Judd and Ben Cousins.
You heard me. You know what it is?
That's outrageous.
You know what my favourite part of him is? He looks someone dead in the eye and he says to himself, "I can take you," which he then proceeds. Take a couple bounces and drive straight past them.
Okay, best moment of the round was the Darcy Byrne-Jones winning goal. Second best moment, the Harley Reid goal. Third best moment, Chad Warner taking 5 bounces through the centre of the ground while laughing his head off. He was just laughing his head off while doing it.
That's exactly what I'm referring to. It was,
with a guy on his tail.
I think it was Jack Carroll potentially was chasing. I can't remember.
Yeah, it might have been. Carlton midfielder on his tail, and he's just laughing his head off running through the middle.
He's just having a good time. I love it. He looks at him, I can take you.
Yeah.
My number 4 was Dean Rampy, the Rolls-Royce defender. Stick him on any forward in the league and watch him win the battle. Mm-hmm. Seriously, the way he maneuvers his body and uses his footy IQ to outplay a forward, there are very few who have the defensive craft of Rampy in the league.
I love it. I think I know we're using all these superlatives, but the Swans really do have everything at the moment. I think he's the most intelligent player that I've seen. Maybe him and Max Gawn, a couple of those guys that are just so intelligent and just clearly just outsmart their opponent every time.
Exactly. My number 3 was Grundy. And I've got a nickname for him. I call him the Enabler. Without him, none of this works. We weren't sure of his impact in the first few rounds. After round 0, we saw him dominate Max Gawn, but then he did have a few quiet rounds. But the way he allows the mids to dominate the clearance, plus his follow-up work and intercept work is vital to how we play. And I think we're seeing the difference of how Hickey and Laddams played previously to where Brodie Grundy how he's playing now. And you're going to find this interesting.
Yeah.
My number 2 is Isaac Heaney. He's the best player in the competition.
Wow.
The best player in the competition, the Brownlow favourite, two-way midfielder, one of the best one-on-one marks in the competition. He's a great tackle.
I love this, actually.
Kick, goal scorer. And I'm sure you were looking on your list because you know who my number 1 is going to be. It's Tom McCartan. Now, our forward-thinking ball movement, and we love the transition, flying forward through, it's Cunningham running through, it's Lloyd running through, Goulder running through, Blakey running through, leaving defenders one-on-one. The way this guy flies under the radar, and he doesn't get shouts for All Australia, he doesn't get shouts for best defenders in the league. Coming off his man, allowing our defence to be the best defence in the league. And I know we have a great system, but the way he can play on any key forward, and I don't think he's ever been dominated by a key forward. From memory, I don't think he's ever been dominated by a key forward.
Agree.
And with us being undersized, it's hugely important that our players are able to come off the direct opponent and spoil. And I think as a defender, when you fly under the radar, that's a great thing. It means you're not being noticed, you're not doing anything bad. So like last week we noticed Aaron Francis playing. That's not a good thing. It's probably because they're making mistakes. But I think this guy allows everything else to happen. The way we can just fly forward and leave our defenders one-on-one. We just know we have the confidence that we're going to get the ball back, or he's going to take an intercept mark. He's going to set up the attack. We rely on him to kick, rely on him to intercept mark, rely on him to beat his best defender, rely on him to come off his defender. He plays on the best forward every week, and I just think he deserved the recognition. I know Heaney is the best player in the competition, but I think this guy allows it all to happen.
I love that call, and you know my favourite thing about the Swans right now? I like that call that Tom McCartan is our most important player. He's the glue in our undersized defence, helping us be the number one defence in the league. We didn't have him last week, and we beat Carlton by 52. I think it would be so easy. Like, you talk about Carlton who have some injuries, and so that's the excuse when they've been having some bad form recently. With the Swans, it would be so easy to say our two best midfielders from last year have not played a game this year. Callum Mills and Luke Parker.
Yeah.
Tom McCartan missed this week, our fullback. We didn't have Taylor Adams until round 6, so that's meant to be our three most experienced midfielders. It would have been so easy if the Swans had a slow start to the year to say, oh, well, of course, they've had all these injuries. It's this whole squad. There is no player that we rely on single-handedly, and that we're screwed without them. Isaac Heaney, as you say, is the best player in the league. If he was out for 3 weeks, I'm confident that we truck along and still be the best team.
Yeah, what I was about to say, following up what you just said, is he's the one player I get scared when he's not playing. I feel like maybe Grundy as well, but the way I feel like we just have replacements of guys that can come in and play a role just for a couple of weeks. But we'll move on to our next segment, and I think we'll do this Swans one again, maybe towards the end of the season, see how it changes. Also, what we're going to do at the end of the year, our top 5 players of the round, we're going to add them all up, and we're going to have it'll be almost our player of the year based on the top 5 players of the round.
Love it.
So if you're number 1, you get 5 points, and so down. We'll move on to our hits and misses, the first miss, and it's whenever Freo or St Kilda play, does not matter who against, I can guarantee you a boring game. The most exciting game Freo have had was when they got hammered by West Coast. St Kilda, their most exciting game was a 1-point loss to GWS where they scored some garbage time goals at the end.
What was the text I sent you?
I can't remember the text.
I sent you the photo of the St Kilda vs Freo scoreline. I said, the most St Kilda vs Freo scoreline there could have possibly been. 67 to 52.
And yeah, genuinely 2 low-scoring teams. And they're just very boring teams to watch. Whoever they play against, it's going to be a low-scoring game, or they're going to get hammered, or I just don't enjoy watching these teams, and I just had to point it out. And they played against each other, and it's exactly as we expected, a low-scoring, boring game.
Fair enough. I don't necessarily agree. I like watching Freo. They sort of chip it around a bit. With my miss, are we just playing lunchtime footy, or does someone outside of the Swans want to win the premiership? Who else wants to? I think I'm very proud of myself that I made an early call I made a call when Collingwood were 10th on the ladder. I had them second on my power rankings. They're the only other team that seems to be charging at the moment and winning games and piling wins together. After they lost their first 3, they've won all their games. No one else outside of the Swans and Collingwood looks like a team that can reasonably win the premiership right now. Don't give me Essendon. Their percentage is still about 74. They've had an easy run, and I don't think they stay second place. They should be very proud of what they're doing. I hope they go and break their streak and win a final this year. Essendon's not winning the premiership. Don't give me that. What is going on? We had GWS and Geelong and Melbourne and Carlton at points who all look dominant. They're all in some of the worst form in the league at the moment. Hawthorn and West Coast look better than those teams at the moment. As we've seen, Hawthorn getting out to a 40-point lead against Port and West Coast tearing apart Melbourne, just dominating them. So I'm not sure what's going on, but does someone want to win the premiership?
Well, my hit is very similar to that, and it's I've put it all in caps. Who is making the top 8? Carlton were top 4 favourites. They're 10th. Essendon were bottom 4 favourites. They're 2nd. What is happening? It's very similar to what you just said, so I won't go into it too much, but I have absolutely no idea who's going to make the top 8, or the top 4 for that matter, besides Sydney.
I love that as a hit. It's good fun. For my hit, I've got James Jordan and John Longmire have revived the tag, and just to expand on it from what we've already talked about, the Swans are showing that tagging isn't a gimmick and it's useful to a winning game plan for a dominant team. It's not just, when Finn McGuinness has done it successfully, Hawthorn were potentially still losing a lot of games. Swans are showing that you can be a dominant team and still put aside one of your players to lock down the opposition's most damaging player. Sam Walsh, we've seen he was averaging 35 disposals before last week. Jordan kept him to 20 pretty ineffectual disposals, or having to get a lot of them in his back half and not get forward. And that's what he did to Jordan Clark and Lockie Whitfield as well. And I think I mentioned earlier that I was baffled, but I just want to reinforce, how are more coaches not implementing this? I don't know, just the fact that it can clearly be so effective to just limit your opponent's most damaging player. People have got to do it more.
No, I like that. Bring back the tag. We'll move on to the next segment, my favourite segment, the Footy Pyramid. This was a really, really weird week for the Footy Pyramid because a lot of players at the top didn't have great games. Bont, Merritt, Sarong had an okay game. Butters had a good quarter. Gorn didn't have an amazing game. Kerner didn't have an amazing game. But no one really had an incredible game to really push past them. But we have 3 outs this week.
Wow.
Elliot Yeo, he's lost to the injury. It was only a matter of time. Sam Taylor is out of the top 15 this week. He's had a pretty quiet few weeks, and so have GWS for that matter. And Sam Walsh, he got smashed by the tag.
Ooh.
And he's out of the top 15, which means we have 3 new ins. And not all of them are in the 5th tier.
Jake Waterman
is one of the ins. He's now in the 5th tier. Never did I think Jake Waterman was going to be in the Footy Pyramid this year. But he's charging, and he's going to work his way up if he keeps playing the same footy that he is at the moment.
Harley Reid.
Harley Reid's not in the pyramid yet.
Oh,
he's not in the pyramid.
fringes.
I think we need to see a few more performances. He had quite a few games before this.
Okay.
You have to be consistent to be in the pyramid.
Love it.
Petrarca is now in the 5th tier again. Had a pretty quiet game. Got smashed by an 18-year-old. And he's moved back down. But what did we see last time he was moved in the 5th tier? He kicked 5 goals and had one of the performances of the year. Tom Green keeps his spot in the 5th tier. Matt Rowell enters the pyramid.
Love it.
He's been really consistent all year. Had a one-off game against the Lions. Other than that, he's averaging, I think, just under 30 touches.
Second in the league for tackles.
He's now the quickest player over to 500 tackles, and I think he deserves it. He's really upped his game this year. And Paddy Cripps has moved down a tier. He's now in the 5th tier. In the 4th tier, Errol Goulden has moved up a tier from the 5th tier. Max Gawn has moved down a tier. I thought he had a pretty quiet game. Chad Warner has entered the pyramid. He's entered the pyramid into the 4th tier.
Yep.
We haven't seen that before, but after that performance, and he's had a couple good performances in a row now, I just think it was deserved. And I couldn't find another player in the 5th tier that was actually been better than him. And Charlie Kerner holds a spot. Yes, he was thrown behind the ball a lot. He still kicked 2 goals. I think he's kicked 2 goals in every game this year. It's going to be tough to move him, but he hasn't had an incredible performance move up, hasn't had a disastrous performance move down. In the 3rd tier, holding their spot is Zach Merritt, who had a pretty quiet game, but no one really showed that they deserved to move up in front of him. Sarong holds a spot, had a pretty good game. And Zach Butters moves up. Had an incredible last quarter, brought his team back from 40 points down, and Gordon didn't have a great game. So that was the swap we made there. Now the top remains the same. Nick Dacos holds a spot, got 40 disposals. He was never going to be in my top 5 because I think he kicked at about 30% in the game. Bontempelli holds a spot, had a quiet game, but then again, like I said before, I don't think anyone actually deserved to take him over. And obviously, Heaney holds a spot. I don't think anyone's going to be dethroning him this year. That's my top 15, sitting right in front of you here. Let me know if you have any changes you'd like to make.
Love it. And we'll jump into the power rankings. In 18th place, I think I mentioned last week they need to be paying rent on there. At 18th spot, that's North Melbourne. I think they're better off just buying 18th place so they don't have to pay all the rent. In 17th spot, I've got Richmond. Gosh, they're close to 18th. They're doing they're doing everything to take over 18th.
I thought there was North down here, Richmond were here, and the rest of the competition was up here.
I heard a nice saying from just an AFL guy on TikTok today, which is, yes, Richmond's injuries are bad, but their performances are worse. In 16th, I've got St Kilda.
Yeah.
They've been that bad. They cannot score. Ross Lyon doesn't seem to be doing anything about it. They don't move the ball with any fluency. And that's just not going to win you games. In 15th, I have Adelaide. They look like a fringe top 8 side most of the time, but they just can't get it done. They just can't win the close games.
Have you seen the stat? The last 4 games against Collingwood, all losses, combined a total of 12 points.
Unreal, yeah.
4 losses.
I know that it's like a sort of unlikely rivalry, sort of like Sydney Essendon a little bit over the last few years.
Yeah.
In 14th, I've got Hawthorn, who have been charging. They've won 3 out of 5 games now.
Should have
been 4 out of 5.
To get that one home.
Oh man, should have been 4 out of 5, and that was a phenomenal phenomenal performance until that last
there's a
quarter.
team who's making a bit of a jump.
In 13th, we have West Coast.
Oh, I love it. The Harley Reid show.
You can't deny him that when they just beat Melbourne.
Is West Coast a destination club now?
I don't want
In the next few years with Harley Reid?
I don't want to hear it. Keep me away from Perth. In 12th, I've got Gold Coast. Just such a confusing team.
Moving down?
See, this is the thing, right?
They scored 164 points.
This is the world we're living in, where Gold Coast beat Geelong by 64 and score 164 points, and they move down. Because what teams were around them in the power rankings? We had Brisbane, who just won by about 100 and something points.
True. Meaningless win, though. I mean, it's Richmond.
Okay,
I guess Swans didn't beat.
This is one that you might be not quite as surprised by, but Carlton in 11th.
I don't mind that. They're not even... Then what are they...
I thought that might shock you.
They're not in the top 10 now,
They're
though.
10th. They're 10th.
Okay. That's
10th with 6 wins, though. 6 wins from 10. But I think they are 17th for points conceded over the last 5 or 6 rounds. They really... I know they have some injuries, but it's not really all of their key players, and you need to have more depth in your squad than they have. In 10th, I have Brisbane making a slow charge towards the 8, and with the performances we're seeing all around that top, maybe they'll sneak in there. Like, we know that they haven't been strong and consistent, but this is a dominant performance that they've just put forward against Richmond. Not sure how much it says, though. Fremantle in 9th, while you might think they play boring footy, they keep their opponents to low totals, and their midfield's been strong between Sarong, Young, Brayshaw, who's had a breakout year.
And a win is a win.
A win's a win. Brayshaw and Nat Fife. And then with Luke Jackson in the ruck. Their midfield's good. And number 8, I've got the Geelong Cats.
Whoa, dropping 4 spots.
They're out of form. You can't concede 164 points and expect to be higher than 8th.
They were missing a lot of key players in that game. Hawkins, Cameron,
Geelong Shimala.
Dangerfield.
7th place, Western Bulldogs.
From 13th?
From 13th.
Wow, okay.
They take down GWS. A lot of teams give them a reason to make a big jump. And so Bulldogs slot into 7th.
I like it. Jump on the train early.
We've known, with all of the crap we've been talking about the Bulldogs this year, we've known they have the personnel to be a top 8 side. Now they're 5-5 with the second best percentage in the league, and by far the second best percentage. They're 10 percentage points better than third. And they're 28 percentage points off first.
Trust Bevo.
Don't trust Bevo. If they didn't have Bevo, they'd be in second. In 6th place, I have Port. Not sure what to make of that performance in terms of the long-term assessment of Port's season. They just get a win against Hawthorn, which is a lot to do with late lucky moments. They should give themselves a pretty hard look after that. But Hawthorn have been charging recently. Sam Mitchell has got them doing some really nice things. And Port could be really proud with how they played in the 4th quarter. In 5th, I've got Essendon. I just don't like moving them higher than this. Their percentage is still 103, and they've had an easy run. Another easy game against North. They got that big win last week against GWS, but I just don't think they play top 4 footy. And if they keep winning games...
What is top 4 footy? This year?
Okay, yeah, true. This year, I feel like top 4 footy is having a consistently strong midfield and having a game plan that seems to be reliable. I don't know if the Essendon edge in the way that they're playing is reliable, and I don't know if they do it all the time. I could be proved so wrong about this, but I just don't think they're one of the best 4 sides in the AFL. This is mainly based on vibes, as we've previously said, these power rankings.
Yeah.
They've probably earned a top 4 spot in the power rankings, but I don't have them there.
I like it.
In 4th, I have GWS, and this is talking about the vibes. Their form has them in about 13th. But I do think that when you look at GWS's personnel, if they can put it together, they are one of the best 4 sides in the comp. The talent that they have all around the ground and how they're coached, when they put it back together, it won't take them long to be dominant again. We saw at times this year they've looked one of the best sides in the league, along with the Sydney Swans. In 3rd place, I have Melbourne. Now, being thrashed by 40 to Harley Reid and West Coast, that's a pretty okay result with how Harley Reid and Jake Orderman are playing. Of course, I'm joking. That was a bad performance, but I feel like they'll pick it up. They go up 1 spot with the loss to West Coast. That summarises what we're seeing this season.
I didn't even notice they went up.
That summarises what we're seeing this season. Every team is just so confusing, and I'm not sure what to make. I was making these power rankings, and I felt high. I was just confused.
Because a few weeks ago, there was a pretty solid top 4 teams that we were looking at, in Carlton, GWS, Geelong, and Sydney.
Yep. You now have
3 of them
Carlton
have
in
disappeared.
11th, Geelong in 8th. Yeah. Who even knows? And then these are the 2 that I actually feel uncontroversial about, and that's Collingwood in 2nd. 6 wins and a draw in the last 7 games, and the Sydney Swans, who just about are jumping out of first place. That's the power rankings for the moment.
I like it. And you jumped on Collingwood early as well.
Jumped on Collingwood early while they were still 10th place on the ladder.
I like it. Well, that's been our podcast for the week. Let us know if you like the Swans segment, what you think of the power rankings, the pyramid, and anything else you'd like to see, and we'll see you on the next one.